Hello and welcome to World Talks with me, Ashim Kumar. After years of division over Russia and Ukraine, the Visegrád Group of 4 Central European countries appears to be making a comeback under new political leadership in Hungary. But can the V4 become relevant again without the unity that once defined it? Well, joining us is Tomáš Strážay. He's director of the Slovak Foreign Policy Association. Mr. Strážay, welcome to TVP World. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Good evening.
Good evening. So, the V4 was formed in 1991. This group of countries came together primarily in opposition to EU migration policy. It then went into disuse and now it's being revived. Why?
Well, I think that the migration crisis actually brought the Visegrád leaders, and namely the prime ministers, together. What was more divisive factor was the escalation of Russia's aggression against Ukraine in February 2022, because this escalation moved Hungary away from the other 3 countries, as the previous Hungarian government, led by Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, was much more critical towards the support of Ukraine by all means, and also was much more, so to say, keen on cooperation with Russia. So I would say the change of the government in Hungary was a necessary step to revive the cooperation, because the different views the Hungarian Prime Minister and his government held were in a sharp contradiction with the positions of the Polish governments, both the previous and the current one. So the change in Budapest can be seen really as a necessary precondition for the revival of the V4.
Yes, but even today, not all 4 countries in the V4 have a unified approach to Ukraine, do they?
That's true. There are some differences, which is nothing new, by the way, in the V4. It has never been a coherent bloc of countries which would always speak in one voice. So differences always existed there in the V4. But currently, when it comes to Ukraine, yes, of course, Slovakia might occupy a slightly different position than the neighboring countries, particularly Poland and the Czech Republic, though on the European Union level, Slovakia has never blocked the support to Ukraine and is also supportive to the accession of Ukraine to the European Union. So there are some common denominators that can be found also in relation to Ukraine.
Okay, so that might be one area where there isn't complete unity. But what are the areas where there is unity? In other words, what's the common platform that all these 4 countries share?
Well, basically, the meeting of the Prime Minister can be perceived as a symbolic message about the willingness to revitalize the Visegrád cooperation, to intensify cooperation and coordination in different areas, in different sectoral areas. So I think that particularly the improvement of infrastructure and cross-border connections can be considered or named as one of the priority areas. To a certain extent, also cooperation in energy, despite the fact that the Slovak and Hungarian government do occupy different positions than the Czech Republic and Poland on the other side when it comes to decoupling from Russian gas and oil, but still. And also, I think that there are some common interests in EU-related policies, like the future of the multi-annual financial framework or the future budget of the European Union, and also the issue of migration and resistance to illegal migration is another binding factor or area which I would mention.
Okay, now, we have NATO, we have the Weimar Triangle, we have the Nordic-Baltic cooperation. Do we need another group? And I'm thinking specifically of Poland here. What does this group bring that the three that I've just mentioned don't?
Well, yes, it's true that there exist a number of regional cooperation format that include different actually countries in Central Europe. I would say that Poland also needs its channel of communication with southern neighbors, particularly Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary. So for this purpose, the V4 might serve as an appropriate instrument. It's not an exclusive, I would say, club or something like that. It is a weekly institutionalized initiative, which means that the membership, the so-called membership in the V4, doesn't exclude the membership or participation of any Visegrád country in other regional cooperation formats. So we can just take it as the added value to already existing formats, and perhaps there can be found some areas where this cooperation format can be the added value not only to Poland, to the region, but also to the European Union.
Okay, well, let's move on to areas where they may actually be able to cooperate. And I'm thinking specifically about the reconstruction of Ukraine. As you know, we're hosting the Ukraine Reconstruction Summit in Gdansk in Poland, starting on Thursday of this week. Now, combining the logistics infrastructure and energy infrastructure of the V4 will put it at quite an advantage when it comes to the reconstruction activity, will it not?
The fact is that 3 out of 4 Visegrád countries have common borders with Ukraine, so the border crossings can be used as the channels, logistic channels for Ukraine also in the post-war area. Of course, all 4 countries, including the Czech Republic, which doesn't have the common border with Ukraine, are interested in joint projects in the post-war reconstruction phase. But the first aim, of course, is to end the war and to end it in favor of Ukraine. And here I think that the V4 governments might have slightly different opinions how to achieve this goal, but fundamentals are actually common for all of them, and this is that the war should end up at some point, and Ukraine should become the EU member state once it fulfills all the criteria. And of course, all 4 are interested in the post-war reconstruction, because this would also bring some benefits to them, and particularly to the neighboring regions that are close to the border of Ukraine, because in all 3 countries, Poland, Slovakia and Hungary, these regions are to a certain extent backward when it comes to their comparison with the western, the regions in the western parts of the country. So this can be taken just as an opportunity to all of them, I would say.
Okay, now I'd like to move on to the relationship between the Visegrád Four and the European Union. When the V4 was formed in 1991, as I've already mentioned, it was a confrontational role that they had with the EU. How would you expect the V4 to engage with the European Union going forward?
Well, prior to the accession to the European Union, the ultimate goal was the European Union's membership and also NATO's membership. So back in the 2000s, actually, the V4 countries managed to cooperate in order to succeed in this. Of course, the post-integration phase, they lacked to a certain extent strategic priorities, but I think that they found some, and the EU enlargement can be mentioned as one of those that are of utmost priority, and where actually the V4 countries can bring certain added value because they have expertise on the countries in the Western Balkans, but also in behind the eastern border, namely Ukraine and Moldova. So I think that the experience of the V4 countries can be used as the added value to the EU's approach, and it is fully complementary with the EU target. So this is just one area to be mentioned, but I think that we can find some more as well, because of course the underdevelopment of infrastructure connection brings certain disadvantages to these four countries and makes them, slightly less competitive when it comes to their Western counterparts or the so-called old EU member states. So I think that the emphasis on the development of physical infrastructure is really rightly placed and also deserves the attention of the entire European Union.
Well, that may be if you consider the EU as a bloc, but what about the individual countries? Will they feel at a disadvantage as a result of this combined approach within these four countries towards EU projects and so on?
Well, I would say there, as I mentioned, there are some areas where the V4 countries might have slightly different positions than the rest of the EU. For instance, the issue of migration was mentioned as the one that can be highlighted. But I still don't think that the main aim of the revitalized Visegrád Four would be to serve as a blocking coalition against, the EU or the EU's mainstream. I think that the majority of energy would be invested in projects and issues and efforts that are complementary to the efforts of the European Union. So the V4 should not make the EU and the cohesion of the EU weaker, but rather stronger. And I think that this is the aim that stands behind this idea of reviving the V4, and that is presented now by Poland and Hungary particularly.
Right. Mr. Tomáš Strážay, thank you very much indeed for sharing your analysis with our audience. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. And that brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away. Lots more coming up. Goodbye.